The bot we are going to be building is going to be a LinkedIn lead generation bot, where what it will do is it'll scrape data from a person's LinkedIn profile, scrape things like their first name, their headline, as well as information from their most recent LinkedIn post. And what it will then do is it'll generate a personalized invitation message. So if you're not familiar with that, if you connect with someone on LinkedIn, there's an option to add a note. And over here is where you can then type in a personalized message. So instead of doing this manually, we will be using the OpenAI API to generate this message using generative AI, and then the bot will go ahead and send the connection request. Let's dive into it. I've opened up UiPath Studio, and we have three main steps. We have the initialization step, where you want to scrape data from LinkedIn. Then the process where we generate the message and send it to Action Center. And then lastly, we send the LinkedIn invite with a message. To save time, I'm not going to build out the whole scraping and sending within LinkedIn, because the main purpose of this lesson is to show you how to use UiPath Action Center. Over here, what I have is a little demo of what it would be doing. The first step, you assign the LinkedIn URL you want to scrape. In this case, I have my LinkedIn URL. Then over here, we'd go ahead and scrape LinkedIn. So you'd attach to the browser, you'd use some get text activities, and then save those values to variables. And over here, I just pretended like we've already scraped them, and we have the LinkedIn name, which in my case, if we were scraping from our own profile, it would be Leon Petru, the LinkedIn headline, and the LinkedIn recent post. And if I open this, you'll see this is all the text from my recent LinkedIn post. So the easiest way to use OpenAI's API within UiPath Studio is by using the OpenAI activity. Before, we had to set this up manually using the HTTP request activity, but now it's as simple as just coming to the package manager, click on all packages, and then you want to search for OpenAI. There it is, OpenAI. Make sure it's the one by UiPath. Click install and then click on save. Great. So now if we come to our activities panel and search OpenAI, there you'll see we have two activities, the chat completions API and the text completion API. The text completion API is actually deprecated, so you are only able to use the chat completions API at this time. So let's drag this in. I'm going to drag in this into our process sequence. All right, and now it's busy loading connection. So you can see my OpenAI account's already connected. If it's your first time doing it, it'll ask you to add a new connection. What will happen if you click add new connection? It'll open up a browser. This uses UiPath's integration service, and it'll then ask you to paste in your API key over here, and then you can click connect. Once your OpenAI account is connected, we can then go ahead and populate the properties in the properties panel. The only thing I'm going to change here is the temperature. I'm going to change that from a 1 to a 0. This makes the responses more precise or more accurate or less creative. I just find you get better responses with a lower temperature. Not always, but in most cases, a temperature of 0 works better. Next, we have the instruction. So I'm going to maximize this in the advanced editor. And inside here is where we are going to populate the data we scraped from LinkedIn, which is the name, the headline, as well as the recent LinkedIn post. So I'll just zoom in here so it's easier to see. And I'll put double quotes because it requires a string variable type. And I'll type in LinkedIn name, :space. And then I'll put a plus to concatenate that with the variable, which is the LinkedIn name. So I'll click Control space. And you'll notice that there is no variables accessible. So what I'll do now is I'll just click save. I'll go back to that, come back to my variables, click on this multiple assign. I'm then going to change the scope from the init scope to the main scope. So I'll just change all of them, and I don't know what this L is, so I'm just going to delete that. Okay. So now these variables, which were in the init sequence, are now accessible in the process sequence because we've elevated them to the main sequence. So if I come back here, I can then click Control space, and then I have my LinkedIn name. Next, I want to add a new line just so that the AI is able to understand that we have different things inside of this prompt. All right, we have the LinkedIn name, and then we also have the headline, and the headline is something different. So I'm going to put environment dot new line, then I'll click plus, and now I'll put my double quotes again, and then I'll write LinkedIn headline, colon space, plus, control space, select the LinkedIn headline. Once again, I'll put our new line, as well as our LinkedIn recent post, plus select our LinkedIn recent post. There you go. So there's our expression, right? If you want to download this bot so you can have access to all these expressions, you can check a link in the description. It's called Robot Pack, where I provide all the robots we build on this channel, including this one, where you can just download all of them. The next step is we want to write the prompt over here. What I'm going to say is I'm going to say, write a personalized message to add into the note of a LinkedIn connection request. And then I'll say reference the, just going to expand this. I'll zoom in. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to reference those different things we mentioned in the system message, which was the LinkedIn name, the LinkedIn headline, and the LinkedIn profile to scrape. Ideally, we want it to be an exact match. So let's just see how I wrote it out. So LinkedIn name, right? Let's just be consistent. I'll put a capital I there. Then we have LinkedIn headline, and then we have LinkedIn recent post. Then we also put a capital I there. Okay. Now, if I come back to our prompt, we have write a personalized message, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to say reference the. And now notice, because this requires a string, we have a quote at the end and we have a quote in the beginning. But if we wanted quote somewhere in the middle, you would use a double quote. So this is a nice little trick. If I use a double quote, that will be interpreted as a single quote within the prompt. So we have reference the, and then I'll write linked LinkedIn name, and then close that with a double quote again. Then I'll put a comma and the double quote LinkedIn headline and the recent LinkedIn post, full stop. And then that's the last quotation to end the prompt. Cool. So that's the full thing. If I expand this just so it's easier to see, that's what we have. So we have write a personalized message to add into the note of a LinkedIn connection request, reference the LinkedIn name and the LinkedIn headline and the recent LinkedIn post. So UiPath will interpret this as a single quote, and then I'll click save. Last thing we want to do is generate a variable for the output response. If I open this expression editor, I'm going to click Control K, and then I'll write a variable. I'll call it AI generated note. I'll then click save. Great. Now let's test this out and see if it's working. The way I like to test things out is using a message box. So I'll drag in the message box right over there and just zoom in a bit so it's easier to see this. I'll set this to 150 so it's easier to see. And in the message box, I'll put our AI generated note variable. Great. So let's now click run and see what happens. And you can see what happened is we get this message box and it is basically not the response. But the good thing is we didn't get an error message, which means the API call did run. So what I need to do here is I need to actually extract the value from the API response. So I'll just click OK. If I come to the API documentation, you will see here we have an example of a chat completion response. And you can see we have a choices array. Inside this choices array, we have a message. And inside that message, we have the content. And this content is where the actual response lives. All right, so the choice is an array, so we need to grab the first item from the array. So let's go do that. So we have AI generated note. I'm just going to expand this. All right, dot choices to get the list of choices. Then to get the first one, we want to put parentheses and put a 0 to reference the first item in the array. And then from there, we can click full stop again. And we can then look for the message. There it is. And then within the message, we want the content. So I'll click full stop again, and then there is the content. And that should do the trick. You can end it with .toString just to be safe, but it should be fine. Now, I'm just going to come back here. I just want to see which model I was using. I was using GPT-4, which is the smarter of the two. All right, GPT 3.5 is more affordable, but it's not as intelligent as GPT-4. So I'll leave it with GPT-4 and let's run this workflow. All right, so notice what this did. It basically wrote an email, maybe even an in-mail, but this is way too long. This won't fit into the notes section over here. All right, so what we need to do is we need to apply character limits. So you can see here, it says there's a character limit of 300 characters. As you type, you can see it increases. This is what you call answer engineering, which is a way to inform the AI on how you want your response to be formatted. So I'm going to write limit the response to no more than 200 characters. I know the limit was 300, but giving some room for error of 100 characters, just so that sometimes it might type more than 200 characters. Let's now run this and see what happens. And there we have it. Hi Leon, congrats on your AI Ambassador Award. I admire your work at futurize.com and your contributions to AI plus RPA. I'd love to connect and learn from your experiences. So that is a really good note. If somebody sent that to me, I would never think that that was a bot. I would think a human wrote that out because it looks like they went and put in the effort and read what I wrote in my recent post. And then the reason for connecting also makes sense. So that's actually quite good. I'm quite impressed actually. I'll then click OK. So now that we have the AI generated note, the next step is to send that AI generated note to UiPath Action Center. So if I come to my Chrome, you can come and log into UiPath Automation Cloud. On the left-hand side, you will find your actions. If you don't see actions over here, just click this menu at the top left, go to admin. Then from admin, you want to click on future RPA and then click services. And over here, you'll find actions. It might be grayed out for you if you can't see it on the left. You just want to click the three dots and click on enable. It'll say disable if it's already enabled, like in my case. All right, and I'll just click these three dots and I'll click launch and it'll then open up UiPath Action Center. Great, so here we are, and you'll see this is the overview dashboard where you can see the different pending actions that are currently available. And you can see they are set by criteria, low, critical, medium, and high. And I'll show you how to set that up inside of UiPath Studio or how to define priority. Then we also have actions by type. All right, so there's different types of actions that you can create. In this specific tutorial, I'm going to be doing a form type. All right, it's the most simple and also applies to this use case the most. It's also the most commonly used. Then we have inbox over here. And this is where you have the list of all your actions that you need to take. So this is where you come and approve or reject different tasks. And there's three different tabs: pending, unassigned, and completed. Then you also have some admin settings over here on the right. Let's now jump into UiPath Studio and I'll show you how to create a new task. So I'll come to Studio and then you want to type in the activities panel, long running. And you'll see here under the long running activities, we have a whole bunch of stuff, but the one we are looking for is create form task. I'll just drag in create form task and drag it in over here. Cool. And you can see here under create form task, it gives us a warning and it tells us to install UiPath form activities to enable the form designer. All right, so you'll see here there's a form designer. If I click on this, it's not going to open, and that's because we need this package installed. So it's UiPath.form activity library. I'll come to all packages and I'll type in UiPath.form, and there it is, UiPath.form activity library. All right, if you don't see it, just come here and then make sure that this one isn't enabled for activities only. Make sure that's disabled, and then you'll be able to see this specific library. I'm going to click install over here, and I'm also going to install this UiPath form activities and click save. Great. Now that the packages have been installed, you can see that warning message is gone, and we can now populate the properties in the create form task activity. So first thing it does, it asks us to give it a title or a name. So I'm going to say AI generated LinkedIn note. Great. Priority. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is how you set the priority, whether you want low, medium, high, or critical. All right. So I'm just going to go with medium. Next, you want to choose which folder you want to reference or add these actions to. All right, I'm going to use my personal workspace because I'm not publishing this into production. Well, I'm going to for the demo purposes, but not for a real world bot because this is just a tutorial. So I'll keep it in my personal workspace. But if it was a real world project, you'd probably want to publish it in one of your folders. Then we have task catalog. In this drop down, you can see I have one catalog called My First Catalog. The way I created that is over here under admin settings, and then I can click add catalog. So that's the one you saw, which was My First Catalog. I will just leave it as that one, but to create one, you just click add, give it a name, a description, and click add. So I'll come back here, I'll click My First Catalog, and then you can see there's some form data that we can add into the form. All right, so before I get into that, let me just click Open Form Designer, and I'll show you what a form looks like. Right, so you can see here, this is the form designer. We have a submit button, but we don't have any fields. So let's go add some fields, and we can do that by coming to this form data. Let me just zoom in a bit. I'll expand this. And over here is where we can add some variables. So for the value on the right-hand side, I'm going to click Control Space. I'm going to select LinkedIn name, and for the key I'm going to write in underscore LinkedIn name, and then I'll leave it as a string because it's just plain text, and the direction we want to leave it as in. Right, the purpose I'm sending this into the form is just so that the user in when they're using UiPath Actions over here, so that they're able to actually see what the original data was that was scraped, so that they can use it as reference for editing the note. So I'll keep it like that. I'll then click add entry. What else do we have? We have the headline. I'll write in underscore LinkedIn headline. I'll keep it as in. I'll also add the post. LinkedIn post, Control Space, and select the LinkedIn, where is the post? LinkedIn recent post. There you go. Now I'm going to add one last one, which is the most important, which is the actual note. All right, so I'll click add entry, and I'll come here, and I want the AI generated note. All right, and the value for this, before I write the name, I just want to show you the direction for this. I'm going to set it to in out. All right, and this basically means that the value for the AI generated note will be passed both into the form, and it'll allow us to edit the value of that variable inside of UiPath Actions, and then it'll then pass that updated value back into UiPath. So if we just had it set to out, we wouldn't then be able to actually pass it in. So we need it to be both in and out. So that's why I have in out. Then over here, I'll write IO for in out underscore, and I'll write AI generated note. Great. And this currently has an error. Why is that? It says the selected value is incompatible with the property type. All right, so I understand why that is. I'll just click save for now, and I'll come back to that. So the reason is because the AI generated note, okay, is that it isn't the actual string. Remember, we had to go choices, message, content to string. So what I'll do is I'll use an assign. Okay, and I'll create a new variable, Control K, and I'll write AI note. I'll just write AI note. Okay. And then on the right-hand side of the sign, it'll be this long expression, Control C, Control V. Cool. And now inside of this, I'm going to come back and open up our form data. And instead of AI generated note, I'm going to put our Control space, our AI note, and click Save. There you go. So now let's test this out. Okay, so it's going to generate the note using AI, and then it should then create a task inside of Action Center. And the place it'll create it is in the inbox, under the pending, or in this case, it's actually going to come into this unassigned tab. So let's come here and run this and see what happens. So now I'm going to click Open Form Designer now that we have all of our different arguments created. And we should see we have our LinkedIn name, LinkedIn headline, LinkedIn post, and our AI generated note. Right, so if we click on this settings or this edit icon for the AI generated note, and we click on field key, we can see here is the argument name that it's referencing. So that's correct. We can also change the name if we want. So we can say AI note, or we can say connection, call it invite note, because this is a front end thing. I'll then click on save. I can then also go and edit these names in underscore LinkedIn post isn't a nice name. So I'll just say post, click save. This one I'll call it headline. And this one I'll call it name. I'll just say person's name. So I'll save this. We can click this preview button to see what it'll look like in Action Center, person's name, headline, post, and then note. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this invite note. I'm going to drag and drop it so that it's right at the top. And then maybe the submit button, I'll also put it just below there because this is just additional reference information. So I'll click save and I will close that. I'm going to type in long running again. And there's an activity called wait for form task and resume. All right, make sure it's the form task one and not external or app task. We want wait for form task. I'm going to drag that one in over here. Okay. And what this requires as input is a task object as well as a task action. So if I click on this create form task, you'll see that there is an output variable called task object. So I'm going to click here, click Control K to create a new variable, and I'll type in task object. I'll click enter. So this is basically the object that contains all the data for this specific task. And that's how I'm going to link it to this activity by referencing that same task object, which is this one over here. And then we have a task action. I'm going to create this variable as well, Control K. I'll call it task action, and I'll show you later on how to actually use this. Right, so let's run this workflow and see what happens. So you can see we get an error, and it's got to do with persistence, all right? And I know exactly why that is happening. What you want to do is you want to go to project, and then you want to click on this gear icon, and then you want to enable this toggle support persistence, and then you can click OK. So this will allow long-running workflows to happen. And the benefit of that is the bot will be able to run up until the point where it needs a human to approve something. It's not going to be in a pending state the whole time. The bot will stop running. It'll allow other bots to run on that machine. And then once the human has approved or validated or done whatever they've done in Action Center and click continue or submit, the bot will then continue to run. So that's what the persistence does. Now, if I run this, it should work. Cool, there's our message box. I'll just click OK. All right, so you can see what's happening now is it's in the suspended state. So you can see it's on the resume over there. If I come here to Action Center, I can come to unassigned, and there is the task, all right? It says, hi Leon, I'm impressed, blah, 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 blah. But now what I want to show you is if I click this resume, it's not going to be able to resume because it requires a human to come and actually submit or approve this. So it's what you call the suspended state. If this was in a production environment, what would have happened is the bot would have ended, an orchestrator would be in a pending state or a suspended state actually, and only once the human goes and does what they need to do inside of Action Center and submits that specific task, only then will the bot continue to run. If I come here, I can then come and edit this. Hi Leon, I'm impressed by your achievements. Let me first assign it to myself. It's in the pending state now. Delete this dash your name. That shouldn't be there. I'm going to say, hi Leon, I'm impressed by your AI achievements. Your recent post on winning the UiPath Awards inspiring. Let's connect and discuss future collaborations. Cool. I'll then click submit. I'll click complete. Okay. And that's now moved to the completed tab over here. I don't know why it says 4 hours ago. Let me refresh this. Oh, it's sorted the other way around for some reason. There's the one from 1 minute ago. If I now come back to Studio, I can click resume and the rest of the bot will continue to run as you can see there. So tick this one off and also tick this one off. Let's also just add a log message over here just so that we know this actually ran. So I'm going to type in log. I'm going to drag this in here. I'm going to say invite sent. I'll say with note colon space, and then I'll put plus, and then I'll put our AI notes. It's not accessible when you change the scope. So let's come here. There's our AI notes, change the scope to the main sequence. And now I should be able to access it. There it is. The log level, I'll log it as an info, and that should be good to go. What I want to show you now is how to actually assign a task to a specific user inside of your automation cloud. Now, in order to assign a task to a specific individual so that the task comes into the pending state instead of the unassigned state, the way you do that is by using this assign tasks activity. So you want to drag that in below your create form task and before your wait form task and resume. So I'm going to drag that in right in between, and you can see you have this toggle over here. If you enable this, it'll allow you to assign the task to multiple different people. Whereas if you specific where you only want to assign it to one specific person, you can leave that off and you can assign that task to that specific individual. For the task ID, you want to reference this variable, which is task object. So under task ID, I'm going to click Control Space and I'll type in task object, and then you put dot, and then you want to get the ID. There it is. Now, when I type that in, you'll notice it's going to give me an error, as you can see, and it's telling us the error is the selection value is incompatible with the property type. So if we expand this, we will see that the required property is an int 64, so an integer, whereas it's currently receiving a long, which is a different data type. So to convert this into an integer, we can use convert dot to int 64. That's the one we want. Open bracket and close bracket. All right, so this will convert this value, which is in long format, into a integer 64. We can then click save and we can see that error is now gone. Next, we want to assign the username of the person we want to assign it to. So my email address inside of this automation cloud account is leon@futurerpa. So that's what I'm going to put. So you can target this individual either by their username or their email address. I prefer using the email. Then we have the task assignment types. You can either assign or reassign a task. All right, so you can do that here in the dropdown. I'll keep it to assign. And then we have failed task assignments output. We don't need that, so I'll leave that blank for now. Now let's test this and see if it's going to assign the task to myself and put it straight into this pending section over here. Let's run this. While I wait, I'll take a sip out of my UiPath mug. How cool is that? Click OK. I should actually go and delete that message box. So now it's in this suspended state, which means it should be here. You'll notice that even if I refresh this, it's not unassigned. If I come to pending, there it is. So that worked perfectly. So it did assign it to myself. So it works. So now I can come here and I can edit this, whatever I want to change. Let's say I delete all of this and I only want this part. Hi Leon, I'm impressed by your AI achievements as the founder and CEO of Futurize.com. I'll click submit, complete. If I come back here and click resume, that worked. If I come to the output panel, we should see there's our log message, invite sent with note. Hi Leon, I'm impressed by your AI achievements as a founder and CEO of Futurize. So you see how I was able to pull in that updated value. Now it looks like we have this all set. the next thing I want to show you is how this actually works in a production environment. So I'm going to publish this to UiPath Orchestrator, and I'm going to show you how it actually works the way it's supposed to. So I'm going to click this publish button at the top right of my design ribbon, and I'm going to then go to publish options. Then I want to make sure I'm selected on my personal workspace feed and then click publish. Right, if it's one of the folders, you then want to select tenant. So our Action Center tutorial workflow is published successfully. I'll click OK. Now, if I come to UiPath Cloud, I can come to Orchestrator over here on the left. Make sure you clicked on My Workspace, click on Automations. You will see we have our Action Center tutorial where it created a process for us. So if you're using one of these folders, you'd have to click Add Process, and then you would select the package that you just published. In this case, it's Action Center tutorial. But when you're using My Workspace, it will automatically create the process for you. So let's test this out. I'm going to actually, what I forgot to do is I forgot to delete that message box. All right, so I'm going to come and delete this, and I'm going to republish this to Orchestrator, to the personal workspace feed. Okay, I'll come back here, and if I refresh this, there we have version 1.0.2. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this. So if I run this, I'll run it on this machine. So I'll just click start. So it's currently pending. If I refresh this, it's now running, and eventually it should reach a different state, which is suspended. There it is. So now if I come here and I view the logs, you can see the job started, it created the task, and now it's currently in the suspended state. If I just minimize all of this, you can see I have UiPath Assistant. And if I refresh this, it shows that there's nothing currently running. It's telling us that Action Center tutorial ran less than a minute ago, which is the one that just ran. But in order for this to continue running, it requires action from the Action Center. So I'm going to come here and let me just go back to actions, and it should now have a new task under pending. So we can see here we have one pending action. We can go to inbox, click on our pending action. So we can now review this. Hi Leon, I was inspired by your recent post, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to remove this best regards, and I will keep the rest. I'll then click submit. And now notice what happens. If I click submit, complete, and I open UiPath Assistant, you'll notice that it automatically started running itself. I didn't click it there, it automatically started running, and it just finished running. So now if I come view the logs in Orchestrator, you can see here is that log message with our edited note. And that is exactly how it works in a production environment.